Now, there's two times of year when I like to get this advice from my fellow podcasters here, and I'd like to say if anyone has advice either for this or kind of ongoing, I think you can join our Slack channel, and you're free to give me advice, and I'm free to read it or not read it. But I always like to know how people are going through life, and I feel like this is an avenue, a channel. I wouldn't call it a safe space. I would call it a space where you can discuss these things. And in a couple of days, we're gonna go to the old Schiphol Airport, get on a plane, and we're gonna fly to Helsinki, and then we're gonna be spending 2 weeks driving around in an RV with our friend Charles Lowell and his wife Silva and his 3 kids. People may remember Charles Lowell from the Drunken Retired days. If not, you should look that up. If you like this podcast, you'll enjoy that podcast from
It's a deep cut. That's a real deep cut these days.
16 years ago. Go look at archive.org and you can find it. Anyways, here's my fear, Brandon. I was walking around yesterday. In fact, yesterday was my 19th wedding anniversary, which is, fantastic.
Congratulations.
And so I took a little bit of time off to do some wedding anniversary stuff, and I kept thinking, my therapist was in my head, and he was just like, or I should say, they were just like, enjoy this time. Don't screw it up. Enjoy the time. Just accept what's going on, because I'm going to say my head, the little persona, the annoying Cote in my head was like, I don't know, you should go review that rewrite of the disadvantages of building your own platform. They imported a Word document. It's got all the graphics. You did that first pass. Got a lot of thoughts here. How am I going to balance this out? And then over here, it's like, just enjoy your time. Enjoy your time off. So I want to get some updated advice on how what is, I'm in the airport with my family, Brandon. Yeah. And I go by, the little kiosk, literally titled so or whatever. I see a book and it says, How to Enjoy Your Vacation for Workaholics by Brandon Wichard. Okay. And like any good Brandon Wichard book, the first 5 pages are titled, If you don't have time to read the other 80 pages of this book.
That's right. If you don't have time.
And they go over. So what are the bullet points? How am I going to hack my brain to get out of worrying about this rewrite of the Don't Build Your Own Platform white paper for the next 2 weeks? What do I do?
All right. My first thought is, obviously I'm not going to give any type of psychology advice. So it's much more practical advice would be, probably my guess is you don't necessarily take an active role in planning the vacations. I bet you it's sort of like, hey, we've decided to do this and this, and it's not that you're against it. It's just that you're okay, right? That's what I want to do.
So for this type of vacation, yes, I'm on the I'm not at the table. I'm kind of on the outer edges of the wall, just
right. So I think, maybe to be a little bit therapist, I would say to you something like, Cote, that's good. I mean, it's good to be flexible, and it's good to kind of go with the flow and things like that. That said, in every vacation, you should think about what are things that you want to do in your off time that you will be looking forward to, that you will be excited about doing. Right.
Yes.
And this is where I would kind of give you some self-help, real channel some self-help. Be like, Cote, it's your responsibility to figure out the things that you want to do that you will be looking forward to, because those activities are naturally going to take you away from your daily stressors, your work, your life, whatever, because you're I'm really looking forward to doing that. That could be, and it could be anything, right? I mean, it can just be whatever it is you like, right? It could be as simple as I really enjoy having 2 hours at the pool by myself to read a book or to listen to a podcast or just some real downtime, or on vacations. I enjoy just getting up in the morning, taking a walk on my own. In fact, sometimes if I know that's all I have to do in the morning, I'll actually get up earlier, because that's what I want to do. Or it could be something where it's hey, on this vacation, we're gonna do all this other stuff, but I really want to see this specific movie because it's going to be great. I'm really looking forward to it. I either want the family to come with me, or I want to carve off some time. Or in your case, I don't know that much about Helsinki, right? I've only been there one time. So I don't know, but within that, within the city, there, I know I did go to some art museums there. Surprisingly, I went. That's actually a little bit, but like you're into that, right? It would be like, I want to go see. It's like modern art. So I was like, oh, it's kind of weird. But like, that would be something you could pick out and be like, I really want to go do this. This is an exciting ththing because you go see the Van Goghs all the time, right? Like that in your part of
Sure,
the world.
sure.
So you should go see some of that. So it's like it's just a long way of saying like 2 or 3 things that are going to get you excited because that'll naturally draw you out. And then of course, once you kind of get in drawn out of like you're more in vacation mode, I think you'll then be more open to like, oh, I'm a little detached now from work. I can be like more with the family and more doing stuff.
Yeah.
So that's my
I
main thing I would do.
I like this because it's very it hits up a lot of things about how I am reverse engineering how my mind works. And I think there was at DevOps Days Amsterdam, Sasha Tasty Meets Paul person, not to like take her away from her own thing, but I can't pronounce his last name, so I'm
Right.
referencing that, and she's got that listed on her bio thing now. She gave a great talk on like continuous learning with respect to like organizations and stuff, and she had a good, as you would call it, thought technology in there, which is that oftentimes when you don't want to do something, you almost subconsciously invent a reason that you will fail at it. You self-sabotage, right? And her example was like, I didn't want to take these big tests one time, so I spent the weekend binge watching all the episodes of Sex and the City. And so when it came to take my test, I was like, oh, well, I would have done okay, but I ended up watching Sex and the City instead, right?
Right.
And so that like is psychologically more comforting than like I decided I didn't give a fuck about taking this test,
Right. I just
right?
didn't want
Like
to do it. Right. Mm-hmm.
right, or like what it's some way of kind of like laundering your responsibility. And I feel like what you've just gone over is that if I find myself, and this is very like very I wonder what kind of therapy this is, but I feel like this might be the kind of therapy that Gen X needs, is like it's not so much hard love or like whatever hard scrabble tiger parent sort of thing, but it's like, hey, don't make up reasons for you to fail at something. If you're going to be on a vacation and you're going to be stressed out because you're thinking about work, that means you haven't worked hard enough at your vacation to distract yourself from work. Not even distract yourself, but just to like say like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do, so work can be on hold, right? Because someone like me, and anyone like yourself as well who's done a podcast, ads or not, for however many years we've done it, you're just like, I can always just drift into the default lifestyle of working. Right? Like it's always there if I need some sort of like life affirmment and satisfaction. So you've got to kind of build up this other channel or lane of being happy with things. So that make your own happiness. I think that's what the greeting cards would say. So that I'm gonna try that out. Now we're not going to be in Helsinki that much, so we won't be able to go see the confusing art museums. But we will be driving around Finland, and I think there'll be plenty of opportunities. I was thinking earlier today, since Silva, the Finnish wife of Charles, will be there. I just have to, every place we're at, I have to be like, I want to eat the most regional, traditional Finnish thing here. And I don't know if there's any Finnish listeners, but I hope there's enough of them. Right? You go to some countries, and they're just like, we got 3 things, right? And that's it. Some other countries you go like, and they're just like, oof, you don't have time. 2 weeks is not long enough, right?
Right.
And so hopefully there's we can get some variation here. There's one, I'll have to report back on this. Is this true? Well, the only Finnish food that I know and can remember, one are these things called Karelian pies, which I'm sure long-term listeners know that I have a theory that every culture has at least 2 things. One, they have a tortilla,
Mhm.
and then 2, they have an empanada, right? Like all
Yes.
cultures have
Mhm.
it might be a dumpling, it might be a pierogi, whatever. Everyone's got an empanada, right? It can be fried, it can be
I
steamed.
like it.
You
This
got
is the Cote's grand unified theory of food. But I
Yeah,
agree. It does seem to check out.
you got what, the inverse pizza? Is that the calzone? I
Mhm.
forget, but
Yeah,
like,
of course.
anyways, so a Karelian pie is like a Finnish empanada, that's got like meat in it. But then what you put on a Karelian pie is like a Finnish is something called egg butter, which is exactly what it sounds like. You boil
Mm,
up eggs, you
sounds good.
mash them up, and you mix it with butter. And so, like,
I'm in. I want
I'm gonna
some.
be I'm gonna be eating a lot of those. So if I survive that, if I don't have a heart attack, I'll
You'll be good to
I'll
go.
I'll be back. All right. Well, that's good. Well, the other thing I'm going to be thinking about that I think, I want to solve this mystery right off the bat is there's a rumor that Google is going to pay $23 billion for this company Wiz, which, ooh, there's a name for you. But like, I went and looked at their webpage, and it looks like I know you study this stuff, Brandon. I think professionally, and also when you're trying to distract yourself from the responsibility of having fun in non-work related activities. But I looked at some commentary in our Slack channel, which you can join for free if you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/Slack. And also, I kind of looked at their webpage, and I think they scan containers for patches that you need to apply. Surely they must do more. Like,
Well,
what
I
does
think
Wiz company do?
yeah, I think that's one of the many things they do. So I think what's interesting here is it's really, it's I hate to use the word the platform. It's really a security platform, right? So if you kind
Mm,
of think about it, it's if you will, a platform that has got the ability to do all kinds of stuff. What we would call like a SIM, which is security information event management. It's got scanning. It's got some like log files. So it's really, if you think of it today, it's maybe best thought of sort of like, hey, you're a company that has a bunch of different cloud vendors and you've got some on-premise stuff and you need a holistic solution to a bunch of security problems, you should use the Wiz, right? Which is like an updated cloud take on security. So what I think is interesting here is, well, one, the price is like, wow, $23 billion. But then of course we always have to think about it's Google. So the Google's worth, I think, like, I don't know, $2 to $3 trillion depending on the day.
right,
So
right, right.
like kind of almost nothing. But it is, and I don't know what you think, Cote, but it feels like kind of a slight pivot, right? Because if you think about cloud infrastructure, like, in running cloud applications, that's what, really Azure, AWS, and GCP do. So this is almost a kind of just a slight different take was like, well, in addition to that, Google's going to build out a security platform that I'm sure they hope that like is used not only for GCP, but for all these other cloud platforms. And it's also, if
Yeah,
you're Thomas Kurian and you're like, yeah, I mean, I think one way the review could have gone for him this year is like doing a great job. We're in third place, we're making more money. But we really want to like get up there. We want to be second or first. And I think
yeah,
there's probably a realization of like, we can't just keep selling infrastructure like everyone else is doing and expect to like make a giant leap, right? So what could you do? You could do a big acquisition that is, again, security. It's always the adjacent next thing, right? And it's sort
yeah,
of like, so it kind of makes sense. It also feels like there's probably some conversation about antitrust violations and things like that. And it's like, well, I kind of look at this, at least my take is like, it's not really something that is, if you will, immediately obvious that you would be like, oh no, you're building a conglomerate and things like that. If anything, most of the cloud companies need more security, right? I think that'd be the pitch. Would be like, we're trying to shore up our security for both our current customers and future customers. And we need to buy solutions like this because we don't have them and we're not, or we don't, ours are not good enough. So it feels like this is kind of a, the closest thing you could buy, right? That would survive anti trust review, and at the same time maybe help move the revenue needle and really move you
huh,
up. So I think
yeah.
I don't know. That's what I think is happening behind the scenes.
I like that I like the shape of that theory. Now, with my usual disclaimer that I don't really know about the company Wiz, aside from what you just said. So I'm not really commenting on them because I don't know them well enough. But I want to take a step back and pull it up a level of abstraction, because I think I have never thought of that idea of like, what is, let's see, making a security acquisition is generally an antitrust free zone unless you're also a security company.
Right. Like
However,
Palantir, let's just give an example. Palantir could never do this, right? They would be like, no, 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 we can't have Palantir and the Wiz get bought. Those would be clearly in conflict. Whereas
right, right,
the
right.
cloud
But
companies, it's like, they don't position themselves
as
as
yeah,
security vendors. They position themselves as having secure solutions. I mean, a slight distinction, but important.
sure. And then also what's interesting is And I guess there are, but like, are there any like big mega security companies?
Well, I mean, it depends on what you think is like mega. Like obviously Google bought Mandiant a while back, right? And
Uh-huh.
and maybe the short answer to that is there are large security companies, but as a general rule, much like monitoring, the markets are heavily fragmented, right? There's tons of startups, and they're always kind of, if you will, there's always like a new take on like monitoring agents and a new type of vulnerability management, stuff like that. So
Uh-huh.
none of
Uh-huh.
the companies I would say raise to the level of like is getting as big as like a Google or an AWS. It's sort of like, if kind of things you used to think about at Dell, like they're sort of like tuck-in acquisitions, right? They're like,
Exactly.
it's great if we could have this, but like this on its own will probably not be a $1 trillion company. Which again,
Yeah.
there's very few things that will. So it's all relative. Like let me say it this way: relative to like Google, Azure, and AWS, I don't. There's no security company that's even like on that order of size. So
It's that
everything is
big.
perceived as being smaller.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, yeah. I think after chips, I find security just baffling, right? Because I think part of what you're saying there is making me think that security is the ultimate company. Like what's the famous Steve Jobs thing about Dropbox? You're not a company. You're a feature. Like it
Right.
feels like a lot of security is just like a feature. Like security on its own. Like I guess. Hmm. Maybe VPNs and access management are sort of a standalone thing, right? Kind of. But like other aspects of security, like it's almost like a bodyguard. If there's no body, has no job. And so like security needs something to protect. And that something typically is the valuable thing, right? Like security on its own isn't like a thing unless you have something else, to be very vague about it. And so I guess that's what you do as a security company is you try to move, as you were saying, like you try to become, as we would say now, a platform, or as I was thinking, we used to call that a suite, but no one would say suite anymore. Like that's insulting for things. But like, so you try to graft on all these other security concerns, probably for your typical enterprise buying process, where you're like, we want one procurement conversation and like one throat to choke. Although I think that probably is not a good strategy. It
Yeah.
seems like if you have multiple throats to choke, that's much better. But like, you want to have like we go to the one company to buy all the security stuff, which based on the large companies I've worked for, well, they've all been tech companies, so that's kind of weird. But like, I don't know if there's ever been a company that has like all the same security. It's always a bunch of mishmash of a weird stuff. But again, I've worked
Exactly.
at strange companies.
No, no, but I think that's I actually think that's what everybody ends up with. They end up with a bunch of different point products kind of thrown together, and then that's where somebody like the Wiz says what you need is a platform. And just I was just looking at their platform overview, so they have 15 separate categories called out, right? So just to
Whoa.
broadly say, it's like source code security, supply chain security,
Uh-huh.
compliance, which is its own like it's sort of adjacent to even security, right? Just like can we audit everything that we need? They did something. So there's SIM, SIEM, but they've made theirs CIEM. So cloud information event
Of
management.
course.
But of course, when you say that out loud, SIM and SIM, I don't know, like that would be hard. Vulnerability management. You already mentioned containers and Kubernetes security, right? Scanning, data security. So you kind of when you get into this, right? That's sort of like to your point, right? It's like no company exists just to secure itself. But then suddenly it's like, well, we started out, we built some applications, we added some stuff in the cloud, we've got some private data centers, we got some
Uh-huh.
VMware. Oh, it turns out the auditors are here now. Then suddenly it's like all of these problems start to become a bigger and bigger issue. And someone like the Wiz comes in and says, hey, why don't we do it all for you? Why don't we monitor everything for you
Mhm.
and put it all in one platform? And that can be
Mhm.
a really compelling sell. And obviously Google, it would make total sense. It's like Google wants to be in these conversations. So it would be very natural for them to walk in and say, would you like us to come in and talk about how you can secure your entire environment? Sure. And then in addition to that, would you like us to talk about how you could run all your applications with our things on GCP or vice versa, right? Like, hey, since you're running everything on GCP, have you thought about all these security things? Like a very natural, kind of, if you will, set of two companies to pull together. I can already see the deck, right? Because you can see the sales information
Uh-huh.
deck we're putting together. We could see kind of the webinars we would do about it. We could see Thomas Kurian saying like, yeah, we got a whole new beachhead. We're going in the security beachhead. We're going in with the apps group. This is how we're gonna, take over and beat Azure and
Oh,
AWS. And AWS probably can't do this or won't do this. They're probably not going to buy Palantir. Maybe they will. But you can see like I like it from a business strategy standpoint. It makes sense. And then I guess we should say the negative case would be, well, Google buys it and then they don't integrate it well and everyone gets
mm,
mad and it's killed
yeah.
by Google kind of like so that would be kind of the downside to it as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Well, did they do okay with that Apogee acquisition? That was like a big, not weird in the sense of the Apogee was weird, but a very, I mean, that didn't strike me as a particularly googly company, but they just like, sucked in, kind of like Salesforce and Mule. You're just like, whoa, what's going on here? This is like, someone, I can't think of anything fast enough. Someone like put a fried egg on my empanada, and like I don't know what's going on here. Like it's a strange
But I
mismatch.
wonder, to your point, like I wonder how much like the acquisition of something like Apogee informed the acquisition or the potential. Again, all of this is potential. At least of looking at the Wiz. And I think one way that could have gone is like, well, we like Apogee. It does do the thing, but it's really small. It just does this one thing around APIs.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
like the pitch in the meeting, right? This would be your old job, would be like something like, well, if we're gonna, quote unquote, I hate to use the phrase, move the needle. If we're gonna make a big impact here, we got to buy something that's much bigger, that's much broader, right? Even if Apogee's like the home run of home runs, it's a rounding error inside Google, right? It's just sort of
yeah,
like, what's the big deal? So this is, you can tell, like they even kind of mentioned in the article, like Thomas Kurian like reached out. So I think this is something like, this is his big play. Like I'm going to roll up massive companies so that I can get to the $100 billion recurring revenue thing like AWS, and I build a gigantic business. And you're gonna have to do something like this. And I like that idea. You got to change the narrative, change the playing field a little bit, and that there's some good ideas here.
yeah. Well, that'll be exciting. I think the Google Cloud. Now that I'm about to say this, I don't know what all their acquisitions were, but I think probably Google Cloud acquisitions are a good case study in uniqueness. That would be my theory, is that like it's a different, like you could analyze like Cisco buying stuff or Microsoft or Dell, all these places I work now, IBM, and there's nothing like delightfully odd or novel. There's the word I'm looking for. There's probably nothing novel in most of those acquisitions, except success when it happens. And like, but I bet like looking at Google acquisitions over time, in the last 10 years and the next 10 years would be like, whoa, what's going on here? Someone made like a bulgogi empanada, just like some kind of weird fusion of cultures. But so this is making me think maybe my working retirement job, and I know Brandon, I pitched this idea here on the podcast, and I think you would be good at it too, is I think we should get hired to just basically be M&A. What would we call it? We'll call it no M&A. And whenever you're looking to do an M&A, you hire us to come in and do a robust no answer, right? And so what you can do is, and it turns out that who we sell to is not actually the ELT or the board. We actually sell to the corporate strategy group, because the corporate strategy group is like, they always want to do the deal, right? I mean, I'm overstating a little bit. You've got different factions in the
Yeah.
corporate strategy group, and like they want to do their deal and not the deal that those assholes over there want to do. And, those people are idiots, like, but let's just assume the corporate strategy group is a cohesive, they're the generative Westerham column or whatever is going
Mhm.
on there. They always want to do the deal, right? And so like, you know, whatever. So many disclaimers. So what they do is they hire us so that they can work on the positive deal, right? They can spend all of their effort working on the yes. And they're like, oh, and then we hired the no M&A people. And they'll be like, whoa, the no M&A people, that shit's certified, right? Like both insane and good, because we know that they are going to come in like hot and really tell us what the case is. So if you can defeat the no M&A people, this is a done deal. right? And I think we will only require, I'm going to say 0.1% of potential deal value, cash only up front. maybe is what will be paid. No, as Q-Tip used to say, no spec or whatever it was. I forget. Now, speaking.
I was gonna say that's a good break. I'll use this as the ad break for API layer.
I forgot about that, but I saw your signal there.
Yeah, I don't know. I had to check. I just wanted to like a little thing, so I'll get it there. That's good. So everyone watching the streaming today, we appreciate it. If you listen to the podcast, you'll hear a nice ad. Probably me reading the ad about API layer, and you guys should check out our friends at API layer. They help bring these great podcasts to you. So check it out. All right, Cote. Whenever you're ready to pick up.
All right, just a moment. What? It's a stupid dog.
Whenever your dog is ready. And now it's time for the intermittent dog.
We signed up. We signed up for a. There's a site where you can give away your dog. And we had someone, but then they didn't.
Oh, you're really giving away your dog?
Oh, I hope so.
Oh,
eventually.
Oh, wow.
I mean,
I don't know.
Maybe I should put a.
I don't know. We should talk about this on the podcast. This may actually get us some real hate mail. Like people.
Yeah. Well, I made a good case on the website. You got to write a little letter, and we got a lot going on in our lives.
That's true. You're trying to find the dog a better home. You're trying to make the dog's life better. That's the way. That's the way
the dog could have a better life. Yeah.
Right. Well, good luck.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Well, now my only fear, Brandon, is that the no M&A department of the software defined talk industries might actually qualify as a bullshit job. It might be something that's just sort of taking up a lot of time. It's we got a lot of meetings going on that it drives, and it's really just going to be part of the problem of what is going on with all this meta work in the world, right? It's just lots of meetings that we have, and this is a train of thought that comes up every now and then. I was thinking about this earlier this week. Do you remember that whole quiet quitting thing that people were doing? And so I think we started with the quiet quitting, which was kind of like the worker friendly version of what the fuck happened to my productivity, right?
Right
now, and then somewhere in between there is this kind of it's popped up again, this idea that why are we in meetings so often, right? There's studies here and there, things going on, and you've even got very, very close to home. At least as far as what I do and what we do is there's even some hand wringing about the value of DevRel, and that when DevRel is being stressed about, that when Dev.
Go ahead, you can take it again. You take your time. Start with the DevRel.
And when DevRel is being talked about being cut, marketing's next on the chopping block, right? Because really DevRel is just some oddity of marketing. Anyways. Hold on.
The dog and the daughter, they're DevRel fans. Michael, I love it.
I'm pulling a Matt Ray here. Oh boy,
someone has to do it.
Okay, I'm gonna be holding the dog for the rest of the podcast here.
Okay, all right.
All right, I'll go back to in
DevRel. Yep.
Okay. And I feel when DevRel is having sort of being told they need better metrics, marketing is not far behind. Right, because marketing is always what are they doing for us? I think it's your head of sales that gets fired first in the startup life cycle, right? And maybe marketing, and then the CEO. I think that's the three letters.
Generally, I think that's
of tech CEOs. Yeah. Anyways, so I don't know, Brandon. What do you how when you're doing your work day to day, you're looking at other people doing stuff. Are there too many meetings? Are we? Could we optimize some more, or what's going on here?
Well, I think a couple things here, and a couple things jumped out at me this week that got me thinking about sort of the broad topic. One was the whole idea of DevRel, and whenever someone posts something about like, how do you justify it? It's always good to read that stuff, but it's sort of like a symptom of something I think is bigger. And I think the other thing, I think it was in the Atlantic, it's sort of like white collar work is just meetings now. And I kind of think when I look at these two topics kind of simultaneously, I think to myself, it's like, well, what I see is I kind of call it like meta work, right? Is that many
Mm,
times what happens is you go into any organizations and instead of like doing specific work, right? You end up having to talk about like what work should be done. Is that
mhm.
work even valuable? What is the success of that work? And how do we keep justifying it? Right. And I think DevRel is just because it came up this week is a good example of like, and I always kind of think to myself, it's like, if anything, it's sort of to me becomes like a lack of accountability at like kind of the executive level, right? Because I kind of think of like
Yeah.
if you've hired DevRel, the decision to do that and what it is has already been made, right? Somebody that has decided, and that person should know why they're doing it, what they want out of it, and at least a broad sense of what it means to be good at that. So, like, if I hired you, or anyone on this to do DevRel, and I'm asking you to like, well, like put together some presentation about like how should we measure it? Why do we do this? What's going on? That is what I would call like meta work, right? And you just end up trying to like justify that. And it's sort of like you the only way to solve this is if the executives, and I think this is the part where I think sometimes we don't. It's like the executives need to have a point of view. And the reason they're making this kind of money is they have a point of view experience about exactly what they want to do, right? It's almost like the
Mm,
metaphor I would use, like maybe it's a football or a soccer coach. It's not like you bring in the coach and he's like, what do all you players do here? Right? Like, why do we need a goalie? Right? I mean, it's like absurd to even ask that question. It's like, no, this is how I want to play. This is the expectation of each player. This is how the formation, the strategy, the skills that each player has. This is how I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm not asking you to be like, well, why are you dribbling the ball? Why are you shooting the ball? Like, why,
mm,
it's like I need to have kind of thought these things through. And I think, DevRel's, and to your point, is like, I think at a broad level, DevRel is sort of just another extension of marketing or persuasion, right? Like, I know why I'm hiring it or why I'm not having it. Just like, should we go to trade shows? I bet you could tell you've been in many conversations like that. Are trade shows valuable? Which trade shows
mhm,
are valuable? How do we justify the trade shows? Should we do web ads? Should we, should on the sales side, should we do inside sales? Should we have a sales, an outside field sales force? Should we do account based marketing? Right. And the list goes on and on. Same thing in development. Should we do agile? Should we do how should we be doing this? And it's like what you end up with when you don't have a plan, when you don't have a point of view about how I want these things executed, and you're not organizing a company to, like, if you will, implement your plan, you're going to have a lot of meetings that, like, to use the phrase, either bullshit meetings or just sort of like where we just end up talking in platitudes like, we need to talk, we need to connect to the customers, we need to make more money, we need more leads. It's like all of these things are truisms that are said ad nauseum in the world's largest corporations. And it's like what you need is like, no, this is how I want to achieve that goal. And it really, and most of the time, it needs to come, I think, with a point of view, a strong point of view of how you want to do it. And it has to come from either the CEO themselves or a small set of executives. And then finally, to kind of wrap up this long discussion or this kind of this thought, is that like we often talk about the power of founders, right? Successful founders that have continued to run the company do, if you will, almost by their own experience, they've gone through this, right? They know what made their company successful because it still exists, right? That's the area of success. And they know what they want done and they are into the details, right? I think when you hire someone from the external world and they start to just become someone who's going to do I'm going to spend 90 days talking to the company and talking to the customers and then repeating back a lot of platitudes, then I think you're finding yourself in a lot of trouble. And I don't think it applies just to technology companies. I think, we talked a little bit offline about like Vanguard, right? I think Vanguard's one we could talk a little bit more about their new CEO who just came in, like maybe how that person would attack it. So that's just my long way to say it's like if you have a lot of meetings, it probably means you have a lot of like meta work conversations, and that probably stems from no one having a strong point of view about how things should be done, and that's why you end up with all these different meetings. So until someone has that strong point of view and is sort of pushing that through the organization, yeah, you probably will have a lot of meetings. And that's just kind of no other way to survive other than to meet and discuss it.
Yeah. So I think, in a situation like this, I always have to be careful what you wish for. But or yes, and like that said, it does. I'm thinking over the course of my illustrious 30 years or so of a career, and it is very frequent that I get frustrated that people like don't come to the meeting with a plan, and that it like instead it's kind of like, or even, I mean, I don't know. Let me just experiment with this idea that like maybe even that there's so much discussion of the plan, right? Like it seems like there's a lot of cases where if you want to delegate someone to do some work, you just have them do the work, and you empower them to do it, which is related to what you're saying in the sense of instead of having a bunch of meetings to determine what to do, just like have the team determine what to do. And sure, they need to have some meetings and talk with each other, but it is sort of odd when there's an executive who is more relying on uh, consensus is the wrong word, but trying to like gather up and study the possible options and boil down to it. And it almost seems like I guess the theory would be that if you just make a decision and try to enact that plan, more chances than not you're going to fail out of hubris than if you did a good study of something and like you had people consider it and go through a meeting. And I don't know. Like it's difficult to I feel like that maybe this is like an age thing, but I often feel like everyone in a meeting, they know what should more or less happen. They know who they should ask to do it, and then they know if the whole premise is bullshit or not, right? Like,
Yeah.
and yet you have a lot of work, like back to our M&A thing, right? Like, the especially when I was doing M&A, but also like, the associated stuff that comes up. More or less, when someone proposes like a deal, you could probably figure out several weeks of work in like, I don't know, like a
A few
2-hour
minutes.
lunch.
Yeah. Maybe,
Like,
yeah, even less, right?
yeah, you got to hang out, see what's going on. Like, oh boy, it's hot around here, isn't it? Like, do this stuff. But then like you could just be like, I don't know, this big security company, does that make sense for us to buy? Are they going to fit in? And like, whereas really, if you were doing kind of like what we're discussing here, kind of like the meta meeting stuff, you'd be like, I don't know, we got to get some slides and we got to walk through it and do things. Whereas really, you could kind of figure it out. Now, of course, doing an acquisition, then you go do the real work of like, let's spin up the expense reports and go do the due diligence and do this thing. And we got to actually like do the work, do the work, but we
Right, but
don't
that's
need
the
to
good
like,
side. I think what you said there, like, yeah,
yeah.
of course, like when you do M&A and you're like, we actually need to go validate they have the products and we need to look at their account statements and we need to do some reference checks. But that's all like doing the actual work versus like, should we even be having this conversation? Like, why should we do M&A? Is M&A even a good strategy? Right? Like these kind of meta questions are what like sucks so much time out. And it's like kind of back to the DevRel thing. It's like, listen, when you've hired DevRel and you're running the group, like no one should be asking, like, why do we have DevRel? Like, what's going on? Like, what does it even mean to do that? It's like that, like, and also too, it's like an executive team can have those conversations behind the scenes and figure out what they want. But once it's hired, right? The plan, what you want with DevRel is to be like, we've hired the person or the people in, and we're gonna say, okay, what events are you going to this year? What kind of talk are you going to give at each one of those events? What are your online ways to connections to the developer? Are you going to have a Slack community? Like these are all just the tactics. And the DevRel person be like, I'm going to these events. This is my talk. I don't think this
Yeah.
event is good. I think this kind of community is good. I'm going to be on this podcast. I'm going to be on this YouTube channel. And then you're just kind of like talking through the work, right? And maybe at that point you can make some slight adjustments, but it's like that's what's going on. And the same thing applies across the board. Like we're not going to hire the salesperson and be like, should we do inside sales or should we hire the SEs and the field-based sales group? It's like, no, that should have all been decided, right? And then the meeting is like,
Yeah.
how are we going to track the quota? How are we giving them leads? Who's doing what? And it's like, but I just think you just see like all the time these companies sort of just like in leadership, just sort of like, if you will, like almost, if you will, becoming academic. Bring me ideas. What do you want to do? I'm here to like empower you, and like we need to make more money, and we need to talk to the customers more. And it's like, no. And I think, let's pick on Vanguard because it's sort of outside technology, and I think it's a good example. Like, so there's a Wall Street Journal article. You don't have to read the whole thing. I'll just read the headline because I think it tells you exactly what you need to know. Vanguard's diehard customers have a message for a new CEO. The service is abysmal. Okay, so if you read through this whole thing, it cites numerous things. So this is almost like your McKinsey report without having to do any of the work. The Wall Street Journal literally outlined it. It's like there are numerous examples of why the service is bad, right? It's hard to call them. They're not open as much. People aren't available. And then it goes on to say too, it's like the technology portal that they're using and the website is flaky, right? Okay, so it's like, that's it. Like on day one, we do not need to have a lot of and the guy that's coming in is hired from BlackRock, one of their competitors, right? So like on day one, we don't need someone to be like, what we need to do is make the service better and improve the website. Like, it's well known. It's in the Wall Street Journal. And of course, if it's in the Wall Street Journal, I bet you the people at Vanguard have known this for a decade, right? They know what the problems are. So the person walking in on the day, right, or shortly after, I would hope they would say something like, I'm implementing a plan, and this is what I believe a great website looks like. Because I was at BlackRock and I have this experience, and this is how we're going to build it. And I have a pretty strong opinion about what it needs to look like. Same thing on the service side. This is what it means to deliver great financial services to customers. Here's what we're going to do. And it couldn't even, maybe they even disagree with some of this. It's like, I don't want to be open 24/7. We're only open 9 to 9, but we're staffed and we pick up every phone call within, 3 rings, and we have very educated people that can resolve the issues, and like they come up with some kind of like, this is what it means, right? Versus like, oh, well, I wonder what we should do. Maybe we should study the customer support, see what's going on. Now, they may have to delve into the organization and be like, what are the roadblocks? And those are going to be the painful conversations, right? It's like, well, turns out we've got like a real, ingrained group here, and I got to really go in there and change it. But that's like getting into the details of the work.
Right. That's the implementation.
That's what I want to see, right? It's like and again, like if you're the BlackRock CEO or the new CEO coming from BlackRock, you should know all of this. My expectation is like, you're making tens of millions of dollars. You need to have the answers and a strong point of view day one, even if it ruffles some feathers, right? That is so much better than like, going to spend the next 6 months meeting with all the customers, talking to all the investors, looking at all the funds, right? And seeing what we're doing great. Oh, we have such great people here. We just need to do more. And the other one I always think is funny too, is like the messaging. Like, we're going to update. We just need better messaging. Again, like, what does that mean? It's like, no, like, here's the better messaging. That's what you want to do. That day one is be like, I've studied this over. I know a lot about this industry. I'm good at messaging. Here's the new messaging. Now I want you all to get behind it, right? So I just think it's like all of these things like kind of like tied together, whether it's DevRel or marketing or sales. You need people that are like strong points of view. They can't be overwhelming, of course, or you can't come in and like, be a dictator, but you've got to like get into the details. And when you don't have that, you just have a lot of meta work and you have a lot of meetings. You get a lot of articles about like, why isn't everyone working hard? Well, because it's like, you're just going to meetings to talk about work that you may or may not do, which is not fun for anyone.
Yeah. I like the angle here because there's 2 things at least. One is as you're going over, you've got to actually like do things, have actions and implementation, and like not just sort of thinking and exploring and whatever. I keep thinking the word theorizing, but that's not the word that I'm really want. It's like proposing, like things and exploring, and that is it goes back to the other thing of like, I feel like people know what needs to happen, like intuitively, like just like you were saying, the Wall Street Journal is just like, I don't know, the website's flaky, right?
Yeah.
And like I think if maybe you were the past generation of executives and you didn't live your life on your phone with apps, it would be like, what does that mean? Like, but now like anyone probably, well, I don't know, maybe the boomers who are still alive, but like of our generation or older or younger, whatever, after would be like, yeah, if the software sucks, I'm out. Right? Like,
Right.
why are we even talking about this? And like, oddly enough, I actually logged into my old Vanguard account today because I was trying to do something and it kept giving me this error message that I couldn't do something and it had no explanation. And so I don't know. I'm sure there was some policy violation that I was doing because every time you're an expat, there's always some fucking issue.
What you're
But
getting
it's
at, that's
just
just a good example. It's like, I mean, and I use Vanguard too. And it's like, listen, I say this as someone that likes Vanguard. I like, because I like, they have what I want, low cost index funds. But like when you log in, it's like so many, like it doesn't take any effort to be like, so many things could be better. Right. I mean, it's almost zero effort. And it's like that. And it's again, like, when you walk in as the new CEO, like that's the kind of stuff I want. It's like, has that CEO been all over that website? Right? Have they been all over? Have they called support several
right.
times?
Like, are they a customer?
Right. They should be a customer, right? At least if they don't have all their money, they're a big, a certain portion of it. Have they called customer support themselves? Have they lived this? Because that's what they're walking into. And just to be fair, it's like I think sometimes we talk about technology, but let's just take another one of our favorites, Costco, right? Costco famously doesn't really have that great an online website. I mean, it's kind of just marginal. It's fine. I've used it, but they don't really make any claim about it. And if you read about Costco, they're mostly focused on the warehouse, right? And the warehouse, and when you go into the warehouse, I think they're generally run very well. There's a very standardized process. You know what I mean? It's like, go to any Costco, the more you go to, the more you see kind of the same kind of things going on. And that's fine, right? You can have a point of view of like, I don't think this thing is that important. The website, like we may have it, but it's really a secondary to like what we're focused in is making, the retail warehouse experience great. We're going to have our $5 chicken, our $1.69 hot dog. That's what we're doing. And again, like it's a strong point of view. We get it. And I think you generally, when you're in a Costco, you're like, people know what the Costco employees, at least from my broad view, seem to know what to do. You know what I mean? They don't, there's not a lot of like, I wonder if we should help people check out. I wonder if
Right.
we should
It's
serve
like, I
tickets,
got to get a
right?
manager on this. I don't know
Yeah.
what to do.
Right. They know exactly what to do. I was like, oh, like, I don't know. Should we return? Like the return policy is very clear. It's very generous, right? It's like, yeah, they pretty much take back everything. Everybody knows it. The person at the front desk knows it. And it's like, there's a very clear standpoint. And we could say like on the warehouse, they've got that figured out. It sounds like on the online stuff, I think it's an afterthought. They don't think much about it. They probably say to themselves, we're not going to spend that much energy there. And the same thing with Vanguard. Like maybe the Vanguard person's like, you know what? The website isn't a big deal. It seems like it is, but like I'm focused in on telephone support because that's what people want, or whatever, or vice versa.
Sure.
Like bring a point of view. Do not bring truisms.
So this is I think I'm working at a framework, another theory in my head, and we'll bring it back to the tech world, which we know firsthand, and after years of commenting on it, some of us more studied than others, and there is like the Costco example, the Vanguard example, at least from my perspective, and then also throwing in some tech companies. It seems like companies that have an easy to understand transactional business and also keep it narrow and simple, maybe they don't have so many meetings or weird processes going on. Whereas like I would imagine like if you're at like one of the bigger companies, maybe even the Microsofts of the world, probably like the IBMs and other places, you sort of like struggle to be like, what is my $5 chicken? Right? Like if you're at IBM, like what is your, dollar hot dog and your $5 chicken? Like what are these like core tenets of what you're doing? I'm holding a chicken in my hands right now. But like what are those core principles that you have? And it can't be like, helping the world, nothing that starts with that. It can't be that. And like, you know, and I wonder, like, so for example, at SAP, maybe they're like, yeah, you got to like ship gears from Asia to Germany. That's what we do. Right. Or like you have to like track and close out the books. Like you could kind of simplify ERP down to a few functions, or if they're just off in la la land of helping the world, whatever.
Mhm.
And so like, it seems like in the tech world, and this goes back to the Google and the Wiz and the thing is like the more sweetie you get, the more difficult it gets to figure out your $5 chicken, right? Like you got to have this kind of narrow thing. Now you could have holding companies that basically are like these people do this thing. And maybe this is kind of like a Microsoft sort of model where like once you try to make everything about Windows, it doesn't work out well. But if you keep these things separate as just their own things, then maybe it's a little better. I don't know. But it seems like, especially in tech companies, once you try to have like a unified vision, that's when things get weird. And I feel like this, to bring back kind of the meta thing, there's this other type of meta work that I've, again, over 30 years, in various places. So I'm not naming any place specifically, but like a lot of effort in these meta meetings is basically spent on self-education. I over the years, I always call this writing a book report, right? Like
Exactly.
the meetings are set up. You're going out to discover a way to understand and simplify and explain a big complex system. And you basically write a book report. And you can see this in EBC presentations and the way that some companies talk about themselves is they have a very crisp explanation of how they're going to change the world or how they're going to help the world do something or in these fast-paced times. And then you read through it and you're like, but I don't understand what you actually do. Like, what do I install? Right.
Right.
And they never really get around to that. And that's usually a symptom of like this. It's not complexity. It's just like whatever, the lack of simplicity. I don't know what it is, but like in the tech world, this seems to
Well, I
happen
think it's
over
the
and over
lack of
again.
the point of view, right? It's a lack of like a real tangible point of view, right? Where people have like, this is how we're going to fix things. Like, you bring up a couple ones. So let's draw them out. One, IBM, right? IBM has been talking about AI since I don't know, probably the 60s. I mean, a very long time. They had that moment where Watson was on Jeopardy, right? But even now, right? Even now, as I see the commercials, sometimes they're talking about, just the generalized AI capabilities they have. But what do they not have? Like, what do we know AI is most associated with today? Some type of chat-based LLM, right? We know Anthropic, OpenAI, Gemini, right? There is no, if there is, please send it to me. There is no Watson Chat GPT thing, right? So it's very obvious to me. It's like, if you are going to be a player in AI, you need to have an LLM that is as good, if not better, than some of the competing ones, right? And if that's what you want to do, IBM, that's what everyone expects. We'd like to go to watson.ibm.com. I would like to see a chat prompt, and I'd like to start using it just like I've used OpenAI and things like that. It is not complicated, right? That is what the world is today. I am not stating anything that I don't think thousands of people at IBM know, right? But like, who at the top is like, that's what we're going to do. We're going to have an LLM that is like this, and we're gonna do it, or we're gonna do or we're gonna not do that. And this is what we believe AI is, but we're gonna make it tangible. There isn't. All there is like lots of slides and lots of meta work and discussions about like, what could we do? Like, what should we build? Should we build this? Should we build that? And again, you just kind of end up with like kind of this amorphous kind of unknown thing, right? You're just like, I don't know. I know Watson's changing the world with brands, and they had a commercial with Bob Dylan a while back, and I don't know what that means. Like but you know what I'm going to do later on? I'm going to go use ChatGPT or Gemini or something like that. So to me, the thing that's hard there is like someone have to make a decision. Someone have to be like, that's what I want, and it may not work out. And because it becomes tangible, it's going to be open to criticism. It's like everyone believes there should be new messaging until the moment someone proposes new messaging. At that moment, it becomes real. And some people will like it. A lot of people won't like it, right? There'll be lots of opinions. But then you, as a person that put it forward, you kind of have to start shepherding and taking all the feedback. And at some point, you have to be like, it's good enough. Like, this color scheme is good. This burger diagram is good. This mental model, at some point, like, someone has to be like, this is what I believe in. This is good. And there's going to be criticism, but you got to put it forward. So that's the IBM one. And then I think the Microsoft one, I think we should just kind of throw it out there, because I think it's just such a perfect example of large companies and how difficult things could be. So there was a note here. I'll just read the headline. Microsoft Notepad gets spell check and autocorrect 40 years after launch. So let's just think about, how many meetings do you think it was discussed where someone was like, in Notepad, I think we should just add spell check and autocorrect, right? I mean, like, this is 40 years. Like, I mean, 40 years have gone into it versus like, what you would like is kind of back to like a point of view and a leader. It's like, we don't need to build a business case. This is back to the DevRel thing. We should not require a business case about why we need to have spell check and autocorrect in Notepad, right? And we should just do it. You need someone to be like, we need to do this because this is basic functionality that people expect in text editors of all kind. It's probably been expected now for like a good 20 years. I think that's like being generous. And they couldn't do it, right? They could not get it done, right? And like, think about that. And it's just like, why is it? Why? And so bad, but I bet you there were millions of questions about like, should we do it? Should we not do it? Will we really get more customers to it? But someone should just like, you and I just know intuitively, it's like, we want the Windows platform to be good. This is a small little bit of delight that we can give people that don't have Word, that are trying to write a short little email. Maybe kids that don't have Office on their computers because their parents don't want to pay for it, but they still want to do a little book report. It's like, no, we just kind of know intuitively. It's like, this is a great little joy feature that will, if you will, make people like Windows just a tiny fractionally better. And over time, if we do lots of these little things, it makes a little bit of goodwill for the platform. And that's what we do because we're professionals at building software. We know what's going to be done. In the case of Microsoft, I know we're picking on them here on this one, and there are many other examples. It took them 40 years. And it's like, it shouldn't take that long.
Yeah. So I think you're helping crystallize some idea I always have knocking around in my head, which is, so one way of putting it is, I've never been an executive, so what do I know? But like, I would like the following to be the case, that like what management and executives do, the reason why not the reason, but one of the ways they could justify being so highly compensated and being able to fly business class whenever they go on a trip 6 hours or more is that they are the engineers of the system of the organization. So they're not only focused on defining the outcomes, to use businessy talk, but they're focused on like, how do we build the factory that these things that happens, right? Like, how do we, to use another phrase, enable this work, right? Like, I think it's easy when you're managing something to say, here is the result that I would like. We need to have better customer satisfaction, or we've got to like, increase revenue in like, I don't know, Germany by 5%, right? You've got all these KPIs or metrics. And again, at many companies that I've worked at over the years, my immediate question is always, so if you wanted me to do that, you must have some theories about how I was going to do it.
Exactly.
Otherwise, how would you come up with this number? Right. Like,
exactly.
And then I asked that question, and before the words exit my mouth, everyone's left the Zoom meeting. Right. There's no idea of how to implement things. Whereas, so for example, going to the DevRel thing, right? Like, or any marketing function, right? Like, I think if you have a marketing function or a sales function, right, and you want to have metrics around it, part of what I think, before you even ask anyone to do metrics, management has to come to the table with like, here's how we're going to gather the metrics, right? And like, the fact that we don't gather these metrics indicates that there's a problem. And the problem is likely not that you're a lazy ass. The problem is likely because like, we've customized the way Salesforce works, right? like the problem is because we keep shifting between different metrics. So like, here is what I propose, is like how you're going to gather those metrics. And maybe it's, you just fill out a Google form and it starts with a spreadsheet, whatever it may be, right? Or like, and then further down to marketing, if we are concerned about, a classic case for DevRel, and it's easy to talk about because we know it well, but like, is why would we sponsor a DevOps days? All right, this like almost every year you have this conversation, right?
Yep.
Like, there's no lead gen, like blah blah blah, and so it's like, well, like, what do you want? Right? Like how, one, you should have an intuitive understanding of like what goes on at a DevOps days and how it works. And then two, like, what bucket do you want me to fill? And then
Right.
what are you going to do with that bucket? Like, do I send you a CSV file of leads? And then what happens with that? And on and on and on. Does actually turned out to be a pretty bad example. It's kind of
No, but
straightforward.
I think let's just pause there for a second. I think that the part that's not a bad example is like, I think you asked the perfect one, right? It's like, because I think this is one like, I've seen some similar things in like a business review executive meetings, like when someone says why should we sponsor a DevOps day? And like literally at that moment, like I mean, it's too strong to say this way. I'd be like literally say like, you are not qualified to work here. You are not qualified to have your job.
Sure.
It's like at some point, like you are running this meeting because you are running this company because you have some insight into the products and the services, as well as the potential customers that we want to reach. You need to know, you yourself need to know, does it make sense to do DevOps days? Like you need to know what it is, right? And this kind of goes for just general conferences in general. You need to know what these conferences are. You need to understand intuitively, like, okay, where's my customer base? And you, the leader, need to make the judgment about whether or not you believe those are worthy activities, right? You do not like you asking someone else is doing. It's like we don't need you here. You know what I'm saying? And it's because I'm holding you responsible for understanding the market and how you want to ultimately go raise awareness in that market. And they could come back and be like,
Mm.
I don't want, like, what would be acceptable to me is like, I don't, I know what DevOps days are. I don't see the value in them. I know a lot of people do. In fact, you could even say contrary, be like, I think a lot of people do, but I find them wasteful and we actually don't get a lot of leads. And in fact, those people don't influence the buying process. Therefore, I'm asking so-and-so to go to this conference or do this activity that I do want. And this is an example of how I think this activity should be done. It's like, totally get it. You know what? Maybe I agree, maybe I disagree, but like you're leading now. You're not managing. You know what I mean? And I think
Yeah.
that is the big distinction, right? And it's like, and you can play this across all of these decisions, right? Like, why do we go to trade shows? Why do we do web marketing? I used to have the CEO, this executive that would rail forever about why they're like, airport ads are stupid. Why would anyone do airport ads? It's like, I don't have a pro or con, but it was more like, hey, what do you like? The thing I would always want to, in my mind, I never asked this question, but it's like, what kind of brand strategy do you want to have? What kind of brand do you believe this company should have? Who do you believe needs to know about this company? Based on those answers, the answers could be like, we should do airport ads or we shouldn't. You know what I mean? But like, they were just like, they just talked about like, oh, that was a waste. But they never came back with like, here's my brand strategy. Right. And that's always like, that's what I'm looking for. Right. Like, answer those questions.
Yeah.
If you answer
No,
those questions, then I will give you answers to what I can help you with or what I can't help you with.
yeah. I think maybe to put this in maybe the airport business book style. I think what we had, you could say defining constraints, but I feel like in the examples we've just gone over here, what you want to say is, if someone is asking you to justify a decision in a corporate setting, and they're asking you like why, the question you need to respond back with is like, well, like, how are you going to evaluate success? How does our sales process work? Like, what does good look like to you? And not only that we get more leads, but like, how do we sell this stuff? Because like the example you're going over is good. It's just like, well, here's what happens at a DevOps day, is the type of people, how they influence the buying behavior. And like, I don't know, I don't have charts. I tried to write a report once, when I was at 451, that had a little pitch for doing DevOps days. I think it was all right. But like, if you understand who your buyers are, how the buying process for infrastructure software works, and on and on and on, like, it kind of intuitively makes sense. But if you actually don't sell to those people and they're in no way involved in making a decision about the stuff that you're selling, then there's no reason to go to it. But that's like, that amount of precision seems so rare that someone would be like, well, here's how our sales process works. Here's how people buy our stuff. And if you look at the customer journey that people go through, these people who are here, they don't really do any of that stuff. So if you want to propose to me that we should modify that and somehow we could rally these people to get involved in the sales process, then sure. But otherwise, like, whatever the metrics may be, however many of these you go to and people that come to the booth and even leads that you get in, like, it doesn't really matter. But having that point of view of how the business works, maybe that's like where things get a little wonky, is you need, and this gets back to my rambling about like being product centric, is in a lot of these meta meetings, it seems like there's not a big understanding of how the business actually functions, like the products that people are buying from it. And so you're always making book reports and doing things. I don't know. I feel like ironically, we've had a long meeting about too many meetings, Brandon.
Well, it
To
has. We definitely had a meta discussion about meta work, which maybe in the end is the most pointless of it all. But I just think the reason to kind of like maybe wrap it up is just sort of like, yeah, the DevRel was just sort of like the lightning rod for this week because I just get it. Like I told, like we're all in these meetings all the time. We're just like we're talking again. We're just talking about what work could be done, and I just think it comes back to like just kind of this simple fun of accountability. Like if we are going to have executives and they are going to be highly paid, the thing that we can ask of them, strong points of view about what they want done. Maybe we agree, maybe we disagree, but we can even decide. Like if someone says, I don't believe in DevRel, then you don't go work there as a DevRel person, right? If someone says like, I really get it, I believe DevRel, and then you know what I mean? Like it would be very easy to like figure out where you should work. And versus like, and I think it'd be better for the executives as well, versus about having a whole staff of people doing a bunch of stuff you don't understand or you don't think is good. It's like, well, like, make a call, and hopefully that would lead to like
right.
either better outcomes or like faster failures too. It's like, it may turn out that that executive had the wrong answers, right? And it didn't go well. And well, you bring in somebody else with another set of ideas and point of views, but at least you make progress and you kind of get away from these, like, all these articles like white collar work is just meetings now. Because I think executives, like, let's take the other side of the deal. Like, I think venture capitalists, to some degrees, large investors and executives, there's this like, you can't even say that, like quiet quitting, like, and everyone's just in meetings and no one's doing work. It's like, I think like the answer to that could also be you. You know what I'm saying? Like that's kind of my thing back to this. Like if you were more clear about what you really wanted and you took more chances about putting out your own opinions, you won't have less of this. But what you would get, and this is the scary part, probably more accountability on you. Because like when someone
Yeah,
says
for
like,
sure.
the brand isn't good, it's like, well, because I didn't do airport ads, and it's like, well, you made the wrong choice. We're on to the next CEO. So I don't know. It's just like, what do you want? Or, you can kind of live in this, like, I want to distribute accountability broad and wide. I want to minimize how much of it comes back to me. I'm the manager, not the leader. And I just sort of say, well, hey, that I'm surprised they did poorly on that. I would have thought, this is the whole thing, I would have thought that DevRel group would have done better. Shocking. They didn't do well. We'll have to do something later next time. And it's like, whatever. I've heard that kind of stuff a million times.
Okay, I want to throw out a principle. This is the beginning of the calendar year 2025 budget cycle. People are getting their slides together. They're going and talking with people, figuring out alliances to build. Maybe around, I think it's usually, depending on your company, around Halloween or so that you're going to be finalizing and locking those down.
Locking it in, yeah.
If you're at a really good place, you'll have presented to the executives, maybe even the board, and then you can just coast through, Thanksgiving and Christmas and
That's
start
right.
your
Get ready for the
fiscal
holidays.
year off well, instead of it being tormenting. I think a new format is that when the executive has whatever their sphere of influence in, and they're starting up this stuff, instead of saying, okay, I want you to pitch me about what you want to do this year and the budget that you need, I think the executive has to spend the first day on each item and say what they think that item is and what that group does and what they think, why it's valuable or why it's not valuable. And they can't cheat. They can't have their staff do it. Well, maybe they can have one layer of staff,
One
which
layer
is to
down.
say,
Yep.
like, you can't go to your VP of marketing and have the VP of marketing spin up three
Yep.
groups to feed your executive, because then you're just repeating the same thing over again.
Senior leadership team, I think, whatever you decide, that probably no more than 5, I think, go through and present.
We're going to be like, okay, y'all can go to like Six Flags or rent out the zoo thing for the weekend. You have to give up your internet access because you can't call your staff.
Yep.
And here's some fucking sticky notes, and just like come up with that presentation. And then for a day, we'll get all the people in on a Zoom call, and the executive has to walk through and say what they think the business does and how it functions. And it's not to razz them. It's more to like force that point of view to say, like, we'll pick it up here is like, well, here's what I think DevRel does. Right. Like, I think it, whatever, I won't go into the whole thing, but like, they are forced to think about it, just like a therapist forces you to actually say stuff. Like I was talking with my therapist last week, and I was like, "Things are going pretty well," and he was like, "What? What did you say?" And I was like, "Things are going pretty well," and he's like, "Oh, I heard you. I just wanted you to hear yourself." Right. And so like, so you got to like, sometimes you got to force this thing of like having the executive discuss it. And it's also a moment of culture building where the executive is like, "Hey, I might fuck this up."
Right, they're
Right.
vulnerable.
Which is
That's the
fine.
big thing.
Right.
They're gonna be vulnerable in presenting what their thoughts are,
Right.
which is
And
like,
they're
yeah,
yeah,
go ahead.
and they're gonna be like, "Listen, I know I'm big, high and mighty executive, and if I screw this up, you should tell me because otherwise you're gonna get laid off." Right. So like if I mess I mean, that would be a cynical way of putting it. But like, I'm just telling you what I think. And if I mess it up, let's talk about it. Right. Instead
Yeah,
of you just coming at me with stuff. So if anyone actually does that, you should join our Slack channel and you can tell us how it goes. That would be fun. Now, speaking of joining our Slack channel, I think we should have a public service announcement right before bureaucracy, Brandon. That you did a great episode, the mid-year mailbag. I've never heard of a mid-year mailbag. I like I've heard of a monthly mailbag, maybe seasons, but mid-year is good. But you started a channel on our Slack at softwaredefinedtalk.com/Slack, the Ask SDT, where people can send in questions. And I have to say, it is one of my professional and my leisure professional dreams that I get so many incoming questions that I don't have to think of content. I can just like answer the questions because really answering questions are the best. Like I tell people who are nervous about being on a panel that the best form of public speaking is to be on a panel because all you have to do is show up like and like
it's
you don't
awesome.
have to do any prep or anything. So but I think the mailbag you did was excellent, Brandon. How can we bring that culture? Because I feel like I've maybe even done my proposal where I've expressed what I think a mailbag does, how I think it
Mhm.
operates.
Yep.
Like how does that match with our financial planning, our corporate planning for next year?
Yeah, well, I think that's a great lead in because I want to channeling our conversation today. I want to be specific in asking what I would like you, the listener, to do to help us make a better mailbag question. So you have two options. You can go into the Slack, and as Cote mentioned, you can join the Ask SDT channel. Post in any questions you want answered, and we'll make sure to answer them on the show. I think for the most part, within reason, almost every question will get an answer. They all get read. If you prefer, you can obviously direct message me in Slack, send me your question if you think you want to stay anonymous. Or surprisingly, Cote, maybe not everyone knows this, we have an email address called questions@softwaredefinedtalk.com. You can email your
Nice.
question that way. So do one of those things, do all of those things if you want as well, because I think I enjoyed being on the mailbag with Brian. And I know occasionally we get some questions, but it's always fun. Now, I don't want to just be the executive out here telling you like, this is what I think you should do. I want to set an example for everyone. So Cote, you may have heard this and not known it. I recently sent a podcast question. What, do you know, Cote? Can you guess which podcast I sent a question to?
Well, I can't, but I'm cheating.
Okay. Well, the one I
I've
sent
called my
to,
staff and asked them to put together a
that's
slide
right.
in
So
response
I
to this.
recently sent a question into Ben Thompson and the Sharp Tech podcast, right? And so I wrote it up, I sent it in, and they were nice enough to answer my question on their last show. So we're gonna do a little secret thing here. In theory, it's a paid podcast, but if you click the link that's in the show notes, you can go listen. I lined it up so right where they ask my question, it goes to. So you can listen to Andrew Sharp and Ben Thompson
Mm,
answer my question. Should I tease a little bit? You think, should I tell them what the question was, or should I
sure.
let people do
Yeah.
it? So it's a question about Formula One, Apple, and maybe the future. So if you're interested in those topics, you can listen to me ask the question, and then you can listen to me. I'll listen to their answer, which is fun because I like I listen to tons of podcasts, right? I like to participate in the podcast communities as well. And so that's just a way of saying it's like, hey, listen, if Ben Thompson, who has a few more listeners than we do and a lot more revenue than we do, if he's going to answer my question, surely all of you who have questions, we're going to read your question on air and give some answers. Now, finally, if you don't have any questions, you have answers to everything in your life, but you need what you need stickers, Cote. You need some joy and happiness that you can show everyone. All you have to do is send your postal address to stickers@softwaredefinedtalk.com, and I will be happy to send you a sticker anywhere in the world.
Well, also, there's several conferences coming up. Now, I have what I want to talk about, what I want to think of as a optimized single track online conference that you can attend next week. Some people might call it a webinar, but I wouldn't. And it's going to be me and two of my coworkers talking about the State of Cloud Native State of Cloud Native Platform Survey, which is, we used to call it the State of Kubernetes Survey, but we've kind of generalized it. And I've been working on this with them. I think it's, I'm going to be in there, get some questions asked by the moderator. Of course, we're going to talk about the VMware Tanzu a little bit. It's going to be great. But it's next week, July 24th. And if you go to the show notes at softwaredefinedtalk.com, you can sign up for the single track free online webinar that is going to maximize the impact of platform strategies in your organization as you transform in these fast-paced times to take advantage of tailwinds despite macroeconomic headwinds or something like that. Anyhow, also, there's DevOps Days Birmingham, August 19th to 21st. I'll be at DevOps Days Antwerp giving a 5-minute talk, which I haven't done in a while, but that'll be fun. I proposed a talk called Slow DevOps, or the slowing of DevOps. I should go look it up. But when I proposed it, it was sort of like, a lot of the stuff we talk about. This is actually, it's September 4th to 5th. And I think it'll probably still be good timing for the eulogy and the death of DevOps. And so I'm planning on kind of going in there and being like, what's going on here? Maybe pull a little Cote Rooney, see how that works out for 5 minutes. Also, we have Spring One and VMware Explore US coming up. Now, I haven't mentioned this before, but I should have, is that Spring One actually will be all online as well as in person if you want to attend in person. But you can watch all the talks for free, the keynote online if you go to spring1.io. It'd be funny if it was spring1.io.com, wouldn't it? But it's just spring1.io. Also, I'll be speaking at SRE Day London, September 19th and 20th, and you can get a 20% off code. If you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/476, you can find that code. This will be like the third or fourth time I'm speaking there. It's a nice, it's a well done conference. It's very nice. Now with that, Brandon, what do you have to recommend this episode?
So kind of going all the way back to our conversation at the very beginning, like how do you make vacations more fun? So this is sort of not necessarily a vacation, but something I like to do. Sometimes I don't necessarily enjoy just sightseeing. I'm usually like, as I like kind of joke, it's like in Barcelona, it's like, oh, there's the Sagrada Familia. It's like, okay, seen it. Let's move on. Like, I don't really want to spend a lot of time walking around in it. But what I do find is like, if there's like an activity or something like at a fun site, that like makes it a lot more fun to me. So last night, my son and I, we went out here in Austin to, it's called the Circuit of the Americas track. So that's where they run the Formula One race. And what they do kind of is they have a bike night where you can just like take your bike and ride the track. So you can just ride around the track and just kind of check it all out. And I thought that that was really fun because we'd seen it on TV, and instead of just like going out and like looking at the track, we got to ride our bikes. We got to go to all the turns, and we could stop, get something to eat, drink some water and things like that. And we also learned that it actually has a lot more elevation than it looks like on TV. So it was quite good. Yeah. So if you're here in Austin, and I put a link in there. They have certain nights. I think it's usually on Tuesday nights. You can go out. You don't have to have any specific kind of bike. There's everyone from like triathletes to like kids just riding like little dirt bikes. So you can just have whatever you want. They also have like they've done nicely. They've made like, if you will, if you don't want to ride the whole track, they've sort of, if you will, have like little shorter rides on the track. So it's like maybe you're with some kids that don't want to ride super long, but they want to see what the pit lane looks like and things like that. So it's fun. It's like just a fun way to like experience at least here in Austin, like a major kind of place of interest, but like do something there and actually have some memories, and if you will. And that way, when we can watch the Formula One cars go around next year, we'll like, yep, I've been right at that turn. I know exactly what it is. So if you like riding bikes, you like Formula One, or you're just like looking for something to do, you want to ride around a fancy racetrack, check out the Circuit of the Americas bike night.
That sounds amazing. I want to do that. Like, I sound like my 4.5-year-old Mila. I want to do that.
Well, When you're here, when next time you're here, you
Is
know
that
what
is
you're
that
gonna
a
do.
is that a regular thing, or is it just like once a year? Do they do that during
Yeah, no, they
Christmas?
do it kind of throughout the year. So I think there's like 4 or 5 next time. And they're now, if you can, the next ones are really going to be more in the fall, which will honestly be better, much better weather.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
like,
yeah.
I'm at the point, it gets so hot at the beginning of the summer, like you never want to go outside. But then it's just like, oh, now it's just like, yeah, it's just unbelievably hot. And you just like go do stuff. You're just like, whatever. I'm just going to be very sweaty, bring water. But like if you're not conditioned to that Texas climate, just wait till September and October. That'll be a more fun time to do it.
Yeah, yeah. Huh. That's fun. Anyways, so I've got a I'm going to call it a double underlined recommendation. I think I've recommended this before, but I think the if you're in the Marriott family of hotels, I think the Courtyards are pretty good. Now, I haven't done extensive work stateside because as well documented here, the variation between international Marriotts and U.S. based Marriotts can be vast, right? Like it can be every don't stay in a Renaissance in the United States. Maybe it's okay elsewhere, etc. But I was at a Courtyard recently, and it's great. They're nice hotels. They do a good job. Not super expensive. Now, my other recommendation is I tried using this app at one point, and then I stopped using it several years ago. And for some, I forget why I went back into it, but you know I don't really use calculator apps. I usually just like open up drafts and type in the numbers that I want, and then go to Google and literally just use the Google search bar as a
Yeah.
calculator, and it's
Yep.
great because like what I want is like a log of what I've done, like in life, but in my calculating, and I rediscovered that this Solver app, which is spelled Solver, Solver, I guess. I don't know how to pronounce things, but it does exactly that. It's basically like if you imagine a text editor, or if you use something like drafts, you can have multiple sheets, and then you just put math shit in each sheet, and it just keeps them. And like you can also do stuff like you can do like €1 to dollar, or you could say like what is if I owned, which I don't, if I owned 10,000 shares of Apple stock, I could be like AAPL times 10,000, and it'll just kind of like figure this kind of stuff up. And then it also just has it keeps track of all of that for you, instead of like most calendar apps are like analog calendar apps where it has no memory. It's just kind of like weird or whatever. So I think it's great. And if you use Set App, which I think both Matt Ray and I have recommended, do you use Set App, Brandon? Maybe you've recommended it.
I don't
It's
think so. No.
basically it's basically like an alternate world app store that you pay maybe $130 a year for, and you just get all you can eat apps. So there's a lot of good ones in there, but it's in there. So if you use Set App, it's already in there, and it works on your phone, and of course it syncs up. It's great. I just keep it up and running so that I can go there and potentially use it.
I love it.
Oftentimes,
This is pretty cool. I like that little tagline: a playground for ideas involving math. It seems like, yeah,
yeah.
very
Now,
cool.
now, now that you'll be using it, you'll be like, can I do some sort of Python injection in here? And I think you can actually add an open API key, but I don't really know what that would do. But
Yeah, we'll have to see, because I know the new calculator app coming in for the iPad. Although I don't know, it has all the fancy stuff you can write with
yeah,
your pen and stuff. But this looks, I do. This looks really well done. I agree. Like I do the same thing. I end up using Spotlight sometimes. I'll just type in my math, kind of mental math into Spotlight, and it'll do it. But yeah, I like this. This is a cool little idea. It's cool. I'm gonna
yeah,
check
yeah.
it out.
And you can imagine, since it's basically like a text editor, that you could probably, without getting too clever, do things like copy spreadsheets, CSVs around, and just make sure it pastes correctly. All sorts of interesting things for
Yeah,
how
some cool
you
stuff here for sure.
you're calculating stuff. So, speaking of cool stuff, you've just listened to another episode of Software Defined Talk. You can get the full show notes for this episode. There's all sorts of stuff we didn't mention. I think, in particular, I mentioned the bullshit jobs thing. I found the original article. There's a whole book, which I don't know. I was like, do I really need to read this whole book? And then thankfully, I went and looked at the book, and it was like, oh, the book is based on this article. I was like, perfect. Now I'm going to get it. Uh, Which it was a good, normally I would complain about an article like this that it doesn't really substantiate any of the claims with like footnotes or figures, but that's what I would expect the book to do, right? I would
Exactly.
expect
Right.
I would
Yeah.
expect the book to be like chapter 1, like here's the two parts, the two paragraphs from the article, and now I'm going to prove it all out, right? Which would be fine. Very rarely that happens. Anyways, but it's a good article. You can find the link to it. The original Bullshit Jobs article, which I think will touch on a lot of stuff that Brandon and I didn't get around to. But if you go to softwaredefinedtalk.com/467, no, softwaredefinedtalk.com/476. That's 476. After you read the show notes for 10 episodes ago, you can read the new episodes show notes. Anyways, you should subscribe to the podcast. See everyone next time. Bye-bye.
Well, I'm sure 467 was a great episode too. So that one they can always go to that one.
Uh-huh.
It's just as good. All right, Cote, great job as always. Systems guy, always good to see you on the chat. Yeah, you should definitely log into the Slack. We've got I don't know if things have changed, but maybe check that out. But Coach, you had a question. I'll take it.
All right, so you have a you had if we had a Patreon account, we could put this on there. But you at the end of our show notes, you had a write up of like the whole meta work situation, lots of your positions, and you actually told me 2 different places. This is the pre-read that I should go through to kind of read over, and I feel like you when it's just you and Matt Ray, or when you take this over from me, I feel like you do a better job at guiding conversations, being focused, like a regular David Slate political gabfest guy.
David Plots, right? Yep.
There you go. He's a very good wrangler of open-ended conversations. So I don't know. I feel like I could have done this better, but you got a good write up here. Now, did you write this, or was it our friend the robot who wrote this?
So this is what I should also put it like kind of like give you a quick background. It's like I don't like to write like long form writing. I tend not to want to do it. I find reasons to not do it. That's kind of been me throughout my entire life. And really the problem isn't so much it's not so much that I don't have ideas. It's just like that it's very painful. I don't like the editing process, right? And I don't know.
Yes.
Maybe at the end of this, I would like to get your I'd like to hear a little bit how you do it. But like I heard this story one time. I don't know which Supreme Court justice it was, but someone said that the Supreme Court justice had the ability to just sit down, start writing, and write like on a typewriter and write start to finish an opinion that was like perfect, right? It was all grammatically correct. It was perfectly laid out, and it would just be done in one setting. And it's like, I don't know, it's like a skill, like that level of skill is just like phenomenal, right? And it's like, I wish I had that kind of ability or even something close to it. But what I found with ChatGPT and others is like, what I've been doing is like things that either I like for the podcast or things that I just like sort of like have in my head of ideas or things like that. It's like, what I will do is I will go into a Google Doc and I will kind of start with a prompt. And I'll be like, and then like this one was like, write a, basically something along the lines of like, write something about meta work that kind of takes into account these ideas. And then I will just sit down and I will just write end to end a stream of conscious, like everything that is in my head. And it's like not grammatically correct. There's probably a bunch of errors in it and things like that. But I sort of like get everything out. And because I know I've got Chat GPT behind me, I don't like get so worried about like if it's not, just kind of like how it is. I wouldn't even want to send it to you because I'd be like, oh my gosh, this needs like 3 more revisions to even be a rough draft, right? But what I then will do is I'll basically then use that. So it becomes a prompt with a lot of information. I throw it into Chat GPT, and then it goes through and it does its thing. It comes out with something that's usually very well written that has sort of expressed my ideas in a way that I like it. And then it's sort of like, and I just kind of do this for my own just things that I'm thinking about that I sort of want some way to like do it. So I just have a little folder now. I just call it essays of like things that like this that I'm thinking about. And I just do that. And then it's like, and I find because I know how I have an AI behind me that will come like write it all out for me, I'm much more prone to then spend the time to like, if you will, do that initial flush of all the stuff out of my system. Whereas I would have never done it if I had to be like, okay, now I need to spend the next day and a half off and on editing this, I'd be like, I don't even want to do it. You know what I mean? Like I'll
Yeah, yeah,
just,
yeah.
and things like that. So that's what I do. And I always wonder, like, I just don't know where the world's going to go, because it's like, I mean, a lot of this is like, obviously the original thought and prompt comes from me, but then the writing for the most part is chat GPT. So like, I don't know, like if I was to hand this in as an essay or something else somewhere else, it's is it because I keep it for myself. I don't like, I'm not challenged to have this question. I'm like, this is just makes it useful for me. But I don't know. It's like you hand it into your office, or like if you're handed into a school for a grade, it's like, am I cheating? Like, is this not right? I mean, this like for me in my personal life, because I'm not grading myself, this is great. But I don't know what the rest of the world thinks about if you do work like this.
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a couple of things. One, there's this. I'm going to get the whatever the quote wrong, but there's whoever said it is either Gandhi, Churchill, or Virginia Woolf, or someone. But it's sort of like I write to figure out what I'm thinking, right?
Right.
Like
Exactly. Yeah. There you go.
and so like there's if you can do that as you just described, right? Then that's really valuable. And like in instances you where what is important is to get an idea across, like a lot of the meta work stuff we were doing. Like you can't really there's no cheating, so to speak,
Right.
if you actually get the idea across. And so, like analogously or similarly, a lot of business literature is kind of ghost written or like heavily augmented by other authors,
For
right?
sure.
And
Yeah.
like you can kind of sort of feel like, that's cheating. But again, with that rubric, with that kind of principle of like, well, what's important is to get an idea out there, right? It's not like, you're not writing Moby Dick when you're writing like, good to greatest or whatever, right? You're
Right.
just trying to like progress things. And so like I think having a tool like you've discovered that allows you to like accomplish that is great. It's valuable, right? And the other thing that you're doing here is uh I think one of the main things in definitely in writing, but in all sorts of content production, as we discussed many years ago when we were doing like podcasts and videos, is like a lot of people just like they can't ship, right? Like they and the reason they can't ship is I mean the cliche thing is that they get obsessed with perfection, which is kind of, I mean, I've read a lot of their stuff. They obviously are obsessed with the wrong perfection. And so like, that's kind of a distraction. The other one is sort of like maybe as you were said, that vulnerability that you would have getting stuff out there. But like even for me, like I find to hopefully make the point I'm making here, like I'm almost the opposite way of like and this is why I like listener questions so much, is like, I don't really know what to talk about, but once you give me something to talk about, I can do it. And so
Yeah.
like, I need chat. And maybe this is why I get dissatisfied with chat GPT is like, I want you to tell me interesting things. Once I know an interesting thing, I can write about it or talk about it. Whereas like, I think as you were saying on the mailbag thing, I think, uh, what generative AIs are really good at is ordering tokens in better ways. Right?
Yeah.
And so like, but you got to get the tokens down there. Whereas like I come to Chat GPT, to play my Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm like, what tokens you got for me today? And it's like, a misty forest has strange lights bouncing in it. And I'm like, no, 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 I don't want those tokens.
Yeah. I want something else. Right. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I mean, finding like I said, I'm kind of the opposite of you. Is like when my deficiency is topics, and so if I had something that fed me topics, then I could get over the hump, right? Whereas
Mhm.
like I think you have no end of topics to write about. You're just like, I don't want to fucking edit this shit, and it's true. Like not that many, very few people like editing. like it's like I was thinking about that as you're saying it. Like, do I like editing? I think I do like editing, which is weird. Not that it makes me special, but like I remember when I was trained as a writer, there was a lot of years that were basically like there wasn't finger wagging, but it was like, listen, you got to like editing. Like if you don't like editing, this is not your gig.
Yeah. This is not
And
going
like,
to be the job you want. Right. Mhm.
yeah, yeah, and I think you can kind of look at editing as like this uh, this opportunity to like read in an English major kind of way something to like analyze it and figure it out a system. And then also, especially if you edit other people and you do it marginally well enough, you do get this kind of like reward cycle of like actually helping people. And so you can kind of associate editing with good feelings,
Mhm.
which then you can bring to
Right,
your
right. You're
own
like,
work.
"Oh, I'm helping myself. I'm doing it." Well, I
Yeah,
have,
yeah.
one theory I've always had, this is maybe for the listeners to kind of decide for themselves. It's like, you know, I don't know, make what you will of standardized testing, it's good or bad, but like I always just think of like people have that generally score really high on what we call the SAT verbal or whatever, the reading comprehension and stuff like that. Like in tying that to AI today, it's like, well, those people, if you scored really high on that, like you in effect were like really good at like reading, if you will, reading, and if you will, converting the tokens, like understanding the tokens quickly,
Uh-huh.
comprehending the tokens, knowing what the right optimal order of it was, and you're really good at probably then reproducing similar stuff like that. So it's like, and I think like I've always thought my theory about Amazon was always that like, well, Jeff Bezos, like he's like a Princeton, like I think we assume he did really well on his SATs and like he's really smart, right? And that leads it to like a clear strength, but like that creates like, I'm just using him as an example. Like he is very good at writing. I think he probably writes very quick and likes to do it, right? And so it's like, well, of course, like if that's what you want to do, then that sort of lends yourself in writing. Now, the further you come down, if you're just from like an average person, then maybe you don't like doing that kind of stuff. I do think this is the place where like Chat GPT and all these things are awesome. It's like now, like I don't know what ChatGPT scores on SAT verbal right now. I'm sure like probably really well, like probably close to perfect. It's like, well, now all of us, like we all have this like person like right available to us at any moment, right? They can they can make us look like they can take our kind of raw material and convert it even faster than like the smartest
Mm.
SAT person into this. And that's awesome, right? Because it's just like, okay, now it doesn't matter. Just like, I mean, the equivalent, analogy I'd say is like, math and a calculator. It's like probably in the 50s, like if you were good at mental math, it's like you're like a savant. That's incredible. Now it's like, who cares? Like just what you just said, we'll use your app, we'll use Excel, we'll just use a calculator. I mean, it's really big deal. The fact that you can like multiply, 3-digit numbers in your head and do it in 2 seconds, like it's irrelevant. Like it doesn't even matter. Right. So,
Yeah,
and I think
yeah.
that's like kind of cool with writing. So I'm very bullish on it. I think that's really good. The fact that everyone can do it. But then I don't know, like it's like kind of like, I don't think of using a calculator as cheating, but I do sometimes when I do this. And maybe it's just because I have like some like hidden guilt of like, man, if I was in high school today, I would have done so much better on my papers. You know what I mean? It would have
Yeah.
just been like, but I don't know. Maybe they'd be like, that's wrong. You should have, you only learn by doing what you said, writing, editing yourself, finding your mistakes. I'm like, oh man, I'm glad I'm past all that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we talked about AI and education stuff last episode, I think. And
Mhm.
yeah, I mean that guilt of like, is this cheating or not? That's like, well, some of it is like, is it cheating if you're just like, you didn't actually read the book and then you want to write a book report about like,
Right.
the role of plaster of Paris and William Faulkner or something like that. Like, and so like that, sure, that's cheating. I mean, but like there's also, I think it's back to our ongoing corporate conversation. Also, that sense of cheating is just like a flaw of like there was nothing else to measure,
Yeah.
right?
That's a
And
good
so
point. Yeah.
so we had to measure your ability to write something on your own instead of copying it. Whereas like we couldn't measure you talking to the teacher over 2 weeks about a book, right? Like you
Yeah.
have to like have this metric, a dashboard. And so in this case, right, like if your SAT thing was making think of this is like, well, et cetera and so forth about flaws and advantages, but like that's the only way we could instrument and figure things out. But
Right.
now, if you could do, the question would be like, okay, so if I give people taking the SAT access to, let's say even you don't modify it, like just chat GPT, and I give them the verbal SAT test, and they can't do things like what's the definition of this? But like when it comes to the actual written thing and they use it, is that good or bad? Like, and it's not even so much prompt engineering. Like, maybe it would be interesting to see, like, what we really want to see is how they reason through this, right? Like,
Mhm.
how we give them like a 2-page written thing, we ask them some topic to write on, and then let's see how they interact with this thing and what they select, because that might be evidence of like how they're thinking. I don't know. You have to mess with it some, but the point would be like, how would you measure that, right? Because there would definitely be some people who took the test who just like cut and pasted the first thing that came out, right? And you'd be
Right.
like, that's probably not good. And then there would be other people who kind of like worked on it and massaged it and asked questions and were like, I don't think about that. So you'd be testing some other thing. And I don't know. You got to, that's not the answer, but you got to come up with some other way of measuring things that
No, I like
drives
that. That's
the,
a good idea. It's sort of like, yeah, so it's maybe like to like kind of like condense that down. It's like, you're not measuring like how good people are at the syntax. You're really measuring how good they are at like sort of like formulating, improving ideas, and then
right.
making a judgment about like when the ideas and your points are good enough that you're ready to like, push it out there. And then
Right,
you
right,
can
right.
kind of assume the syntax and the writing will be very good because it's been edited by, like in this case, ChatGPT, a great editor. So
Yeah. No, and then that's the maybe the last thing you were making me think is like the I don't know, maybe this is too poetic and academic, if those two things can be ascribed to the same thing. But like it's also like what we talked about here is also instructive in the sense of like defining the spectrum between like good writing, good fiction, and like high literature. And like good writing is what we've been talking about. Where like, you can't really cheat if you get the idea across, right?
Mhm,
Like if you communicate the thing that you want. And like fiction is, I would call it like, in the broadest sense of the word, entertainment. And
mhm,
entertainment could also be like therapy. It could make you feel good. It could make you like, but it evokes, I guess you could have fiction that evokes a negative feeling, but in like, a lot of religious stuff, but like generally fiction, it will invoke goodness of some type, whether it's just being purely entertained or like whatever. But literature is this whole other area where like a lot of stuff we said applies, but the point of literature is like you don't really even have to communicate an idea. You just sort of like have to get people feeling in a different way or thinking something. Like it's kind of like you roll up all that stuff. Plus, there's almost this other like, I have no idea what I just read, but it was really great. Right. Or I know exactly what I just
yeah.
read and man, it was awesome. Right.
Yeah,
Like
no, I know what you mean. Yeah,
whatever
no,
it is.
great. I think your tiers are a good way to think of it. So, all right. Well, listen, thanks for everyone that streamed with us. Appreciate it. During the summer months, we'll probably have a few people rotate in and out. Maybe Cote will go on vacation, so maybe have Matt Ray back next week. And as always, we appreciate you watching us online, and make sure to download the podcast. Take care.